welcome back to Fantasy Fiction Friday. You made it through the week. I'm so proud of you. That was a long one too, wasn't it? So yeah, a little update. They are still working outside, tearing up the ground, right outside my window, but it's late enough in the day that they're done. So let's finish up Flur's Fury. This is Glory's Tale from the Ladies of the Lily Dystopian Tales of the Fae. Just to catch you up, this is an anthology of short stories. It is dystopian. It is about a colony of fairies and their descent from a utopian society into a dystopian society. This is the third story out of 20. And yeah, let's just get into it. I'm so glad you're here. Okay. He took me by the hand and led me outside the room. I was outside the walls for the first time. I looked around, eyes wide, trying to take it all in, surprised by the beauty. The hallway was wide. The walls were painted deep blues and greens, and the ceilings were high enough overhead for the fae to flutter by. And there were wooden sculptures of Flurr and another man I didn't recognize. They were standing larger than life. The slippers rubbed the back of my heel, stealing my attention from all that surrounded me. I found them challenging to walk in. I really wanted to take them off, discard them off into a corner someplace. I didn't understand why they'd been necessary in the first place. That was my father, Ray, Fleur told me, pointing to the sculpture. We lost him 5 days ago. Rain's death had explained Fleur's absence. It was not a lover to replace me. I felt sadness and disappointment with that. Not because his father had died. Not after all that I had read. I hated Rain, and I hated his father. I should have felt a sliver of sorrow for him, but I did not. I could let this entire place burn down with me in it, and the world would be better for it. I was glad he was dead. I wished Fleur would follow in his father's footsteps for the final time. Fleur pulled my hand and led me down the hall into an archway large enough for both of us to fit through together. We entered the expansive room that was vibrating with the sounds of talk and laughter from all the fae that filled the rows upon rows of pews that had been polished to a shine. The walls were adorned with carvings of flowers, leaves with intricate images of butterflies painted on them. The chandelier hung from the ceiling high above. The vast room was lit with at least 50 candles. I looked around, wondering where they had come from. And a loud horn blew. I jumped, and my eyes darted around, searching for the source of the sound. The small fae stood in the corner with a horn. Why had he blown it? The room went silent, as if it had been a warning. Were we in danger? My ears rang from the sudden silence. All eyes from the many fae turned to look at me. I wanted for the peace of my room. I wanted to hide. Why were they staring at me? And I looked behind to make sure their gaze was not falling elsewhere. No. Hundreds of the fae were staring at me in complete silence. I smiled awkwardly, not knowing what else to do. Fleur led me down the aisle between the pews. The floor covered in crushed red velvet carpet. Looking back at all the faces staring at me, I noticed they were wearing gowns similar to mine. The men dressed like Fleur. There were smiles on every face. What was going on? Where were these bubbles coming from? One popped on my nose, leaving me damp. It tickled, but I dared not wipe it off. He led me to the stage, facing the rows of fae, and sat me on a chair with a deep seat, armrests that curved under themselves, with a high back that came to a peak. It was made of several colors of wood and swirls carved into it. Fleur took a seat at the chair next to mine that was nearly identical, but much, much larger. A man wearing a red robe approached the stage and muttered a few words. I paid no attention to him. I couldn't. I was too caught up in the surroundings and the bewilderment of all that was happening. He picked up a golden crown, adorned with green emeralds that contrasted with my dark purple hair on my head. I reached my hand up to feel it. What is this thing? I asked, still looking around, half amazed and half confused, and the man uttered something about circles and eternity as he placed a much larger crown of gold with only a few jewels in red. And everyone in the pews then, in unison, dropped from their seats onto their knees and put their heads to the ground. It was the strangest thing. Should I have done the same? If I did, the heavy adornment that was placed on top of my head would fall, and I looked to Flurr for any sign of what I should do or how I should respond. He sat still, with an expressionless face, staring straight ahead. I mimicked him, hoping I was not acting strangely or doing the wrong thing. At first, I was afraid they were going to sacrifice themselves, and we'd all soon be dead. Fine by me. Then Flurr rose to his feet, taking me by the hand, and ushered for me to stand as well. Finally, some sense of direction, so I followed his lead. We walked to the center aisle. The man with the red robes announced us and presented us as the king and queen. And all the fae rose to their feet with cheers and applause. Joy and excitement filled the air. I shouldn't have been surprised with the party and the feast after the ceremony. I should not have been a lot of things. For example, Flurr led me to the dining hall that was vast and as gorgeous as the throne room. Flurr and I sat out facing the fae. Spreads of food lined each table. Crickets browned perfectly in the center of each, and everyone feasted, throwing the bones to the floor. We all drank wine and mead, and I think I wrote fasted, not feasted. Feasted. I hope that didn't make it to the final cut, because I'm reading from a manuscript, not my actual book, so... Anyway, let's go on. These glasses. Flurr told me the fruits and honeys came from the gardens. He sounded really proud of it. Of them. Of us. He spoke to me like I would respond with the same enthusiasm. I said nothing. I sipped from my berry soup, looking around at every fae of the realm of the great oak. Who were they? How did they spend their days? I had no idea how many lived in the great oak. I'd assumed Flurr had exaggerated his descriptions. He had not. He was not always a liar, just most of the time. It really was a beautiful event and a beautiful place filled with beautiful fae. All was foreign to me, and it scared me. I forced myself to eat, then turned to the goblet in front of me. The red wine seemed to never drain, no matter how much I drank. A young man filled it before my cup could empty. The music played loudly, and some of the fae danced a lovely waltz. There was a smile on everybody's face but mine, like the wine. I could not drink it all in. The magical cup of beauty seemed to never empty. I had once thought Flurr's talks of this place as magic. It looked magical. In a way, the moment felt magical. Still, trepidation filled my heart because I knew if magic lived here, it was dark. But magic did not exist in this place, only the corruption and greed of some at the cost of others. It had cost Daisy her everything. It had cost me my love, my freedom, my life, my autonomy. How could they not see the evil in the man they called king? I felt almost as much sorrow for them as I felt for myself, and I was their queen. What did that even mean? For Daisy, it had meant she had to take care of all of them, and no one took care of her. Now, how could I care about the issues of the Fae who resided here when I wished to be anywhere else? All the Fae bowed to us as Fleur took my hand and led me out of the banquet room. Once again on their knees with their foreheads pressed to the ground. It was all so strange. Fleur took my hand and walked me past them. Fleur escorted me back to my room. Each step was excruciating. Sliding on the floor, fighting to stay standing, wanting to take off the monstrosities on my feet. The guard followed us, 2 steps behind at all times. The Fae bent at the waist or the knees as we passed. He held the door open and ushered me back into the confines of my room. My head was light, fuzzy, buzzing from the mixture of wine and confusion. The door closed behind us. I slid off the shoes and finally turned to face Fleur. "Can I speak with you?" I asked. He waited for me to continue. At least he didn't say no in one way or another. "What is expected of me? As queen? As your queen?" Tonight, his voice was soft and soothing. There was an underlying understanding that I had not expected. "You are not only crowned queen, you were named my wife." When did that happen? I'd never said I do. Why had I been surprised? Consent was not a word that existed here. "As queen, you will not have the expected duties as a wife does." He spoke more words that failed to register in my brain. We spoke the same language, but they had different meanings. Wifely duties. "You were to serve the Fae of the Great Oak, and they are to serve you." "Serve how?" I nearly spat out the question. I had so many questions, and none of them were being answered, and I couldn't understand the ones that were. All in good time, he took my hands in his and led me to the bed, where we sat next to one another. "It's an honor to serve the crown. As such, all your cleaning, laundry, cooking, even your dressing will be done for you. You will not be spoken to unless you ask for one to speak, or if they've asked for an audience with you, they will bow to you as a sign of their undying devotion to you." About that, I interrupted. "What do I do when they bow? And why do they bend their knees when we pass?" "A bow happens when you enter a social event. The curtsy is more casual for casual events or in passing. You simply walk on by." He actually giggled when he answered. So strange, I thought. Something about it all felt unnatural. "As I said, every Fae lives to serve you. It is their honor to do so, and in turn we are to serve them. It is a great honor and responsibility. Their safety, their homes, food, and lives are all in our hands." He could see that I wasn't understanding. It showed in my eyes, on my face, my body. His explanations, for as much as he tried, left me with more questions. I didn't understand any of it. He was speaking gibberish. "I've assigned an advisor to answer all the issues brought before you. He will teach you of our ways, our culture. For now, you have but one duty, one thing to focus on, to provide me with a son." He actually sounded as if he cared about me or wanted me to be comfortable, happy. "And if I say no?" He looked confused. He'd never been told no before he met me. Clearly. All those Fae lived to serve him. He gripped my jaw tightly in his hand. "You will give me a son. It is your duty." All the kindness that had broken or at least cracked the wall that I had built between us, protecting me from him, was shattered with that single touch. And I pulled away. "What more do I have to give you? My crown is yours, this beautiful home, all its residents for you. Anything you want for it, and every wish is at the tip of your fingers. What more can I offer? What more can I give?" Grateful itch. He spoke with a whispered tone that sent shivers down my spine, scaring me more than if he had screamed it into my face. And if I want peach cobbler in the middle of winter when peaches are not in bloom, my words were sharp and laced with snark. Why would you want for peach cobbler in the middle of winter? He shot back. It had been a silly question. I needed to know how far this devotion, these wishes of his spoke. It's not what it says. I needed to know how far this devotion, these wishes he spoke of, went. Clearly they stayed within the realm of possibility. It hadn't been as outlandish of a question as it sounded. I needed to know the depths of the delusion that I lived in within this tree. After all, they had named me Queen. Bringing his tone back to a place that was welcoming, almost charming. You are perfect tonight. Enchanting, he said. If you can continue to behave that way, I'll let you out of your room to meet and greet your fae. You would like that, wouldn't you? It would bring you happiness. But first you must bear me a son. Why are you not with child yet? He asked. Are you able to bear fruit? Fruit? I nearly rolled my eyes. There is nothing wrong with me. I menstruate with each changing season just as I should. Perhaps there's something wrong with your seed. I couldn't help myself. I'd wanted to behave, to earn my freedom and a chance to escape. But the laughter slipped through my lips, and I immediately bit them, trying to contain myself. His eyes deepened in hue with anger. There's nothing wrong with me. I am the picture of perfection. The conversation had shifted too swiftly for me to keep up. One minute he was gentle, and the next angry, one giving, and the following threatened. Flurr kept true to his word. So long as I behaved and followed his every word, I was taken to the dinner hall every evening. I was allowed to speak with the other fae. He led me in dance a time or two. I asked for a walk in the garden, and he granted that. My advisor answered every question. He was patient and well-informed. He taught me about the history and the culture and advised me on the proper way to behave and deal with a few issues that were brought my way, mostly dealing with not liking what the chef had prepared, or the neighbor's baby crying all night was keeping them awake. They'd all been small trivial matters that were an easy conversation to solve. And some of the fae I actually liked. And I had begun to make friends, or at least I began to feel not so alone. Still not at home. This would never be my home. I wanted to leave. However, a part of me began to like it here. I guess I was just not so lonely, and it brought me comfort. I even dared to smile. I laughed a time or two, and the feeling of what had brought me to tears, it was so foreign, a feeling that had been lost from my memory. I didn't want to find happiness there. Very much had wanted to return home to my family, to the river of life. Smiling and laughing felt like a betrayal to those wants, the desires that had filled me from the moment that I had entered there. The season of the sun had passed, and the leaves began to turn. My menstruation failed to show. Flurr had impregnated me, as he promised he would. I couldn't bring a baby into this place, a child who is doomed to be both selfish and entitled as his father, a child who would one day be named king and carry with it all the corruption in its evil nature. I had to find a way out immediately, or in this pregnancy. What was I gonna do? I was under lock and key, or in intense security with every moment. My guards never left my side. I was sitting at the table when he came to me. He never summoned me to his room. He always came to me. And he bent his knee and put his hand on my belly. I had stopped pulling away from his touch. So it had become inevitable. With his hand to my belly and with pride, he declared he was to have a son, an heir to the throne, to carry on his legacy. Flurr, my husband, my king, my nemesis, and the father to my unborn child, had been tracking my menstruation. If it's a girl, I asked him. You are to see to it that it's not, he responded, as if I had any control over the sex of the baby he'd pumped into me. He clearly knew nothing of biology. I chose to move on and change the subject, finding there was no use in arguing with ignorance. What do I do when it's time to deliver? I asked Fleur. Do I tell the guard? Will I have a midwife? Will you be there? What was going to happen? I'd never even seen a birth, much less had one. What was I expecting? My heart was filled with trepidation, a feeling, though at times was diminished, but it never left me. I'd become all too familiar with it. Trepidation, anxiety, and anger had become my closest friends, giving me strength and resolve. Tell the guard he will take you to the midwife and someone will send for me. I would not miss the birth of my firstborn son for the world, he said. Excitement filled his voice. Oh. I exhaled. My core tightened, forcing me to double over and steady myself by placing my hand on the bed. It hurt so bad. The pain passed in a matter of seconds. It felt like hours. I had been experiencing cramps for days, but they had become increasingly stronger. And that one was by far the worst. Once it passed, I made my way to the door, taking each step slowly. I knocked on the door and called for the guard. I think it's time. I heard the door unlock and the guard entered and picked me up. And we entered the hallway, and he took a few steps with me in his arms. I can walk, I said. He did not respond. The guards never did. He took me to the grand hall and fluttered down a ways before turning down one of the halls off to the side. And we entered through an unlocked door. There was a short fae, and she was wrapping a robe around her that looked identical to mine. I had still not adjusted to sleeping in clothes. The thin white linen draped over her and hung to the floor. Her dressing robe was a deep purple, and looked soft and flesh. She looked tired, with a round face, fiery red hair, and what skin I could see was freckled with red just a shade or two darker than her skin. And the guard placed me gently on the bed as the contraction hit. I rolled to my side and let out a deep moan, and the woman approached me as the guard left, and she ran her hand over my belly. That was a strong one, she said. The contraction began to pass, and I looked at her lovely face. She was comforting me. I felt a sense of calm wash over me. Are you Aster? I asked. Aster, she responded. I've not heard that name in a long time. Aster was a wonderful woman. But no, sadly, she passed a few moons back. Don't worry, dear. I'll take fine care of you. My name is Claire. I'm Glory, I responded, and she smiled with a nod, saying she knew who I was. I turned my face to her. I'm scared. Don't be. Imagine what would become of me if I let anything befall the queen, not to mention the king's son, she replied. Son, I murmured, and if it's a girl? If it's a girl, it's a boy, she responded, and I began to wonder what could she mean when another contraction hit. My core tensed tightly, the pain running deep, overwhelming my ability to do anything, include think. My body, refusing my mind, began to bear down. I need to push, I cried out. If you need to push, then push, she said, helping support me, sitting me up. And Fleur again, staying true to his word, entered the room. He came to me and kissed me on my forehead. I barely noticed him, less a slight sense of relief, though I wished for anyone other than him. I was not alone, at least. Not exposing myself in the most vulnerable moments to a stranger. At least he was there with me. I told you I would be here, my queen, he said with glee. I couldn't pay any attention to him because the pain became so great as the baby found its way into its world. As she held my newborn, and Flur's smile turned to a frown, and I struggled to see my baby, leaning from side to side in desperation to hold my baby. See my baby. Was it okay? Healthy? All 10 fingers and 10 toes? I had no way of knowing. No one said a word. They stood in the way, and I reached out for my baby. And Fleur's frown was concerning to me. What could it be? What was wrong with my baby? And he cut the cord and turned to leave with her. Her. I had not seen much, but I saw that I had birthed a girl. Where's he taking her? I cried. He's just going to clean the babe, Claire said, disposing of the afterbirth. And I looked into the basin of water and back to her, and she began to clean me. You hardly ripped. That's wonderful. You did so well, she said with a smile. Hardly. It had felt as if I was so wounded I would never heal. I would never heal. I had a girl, and he had taken her. And then Flurr came back with the baby wrapped in a soft blanket, and he handed me the baby, and I took my baby in my arms, and it was heavier than I had imagined, and its bright full cheeks were a bit pink, and the sweet little pointed tips of his ears ombre from blues to deep pinks, and I was in love. How could I not be with such a sweet cherub thing? But he wasn't mine. My dark-rimmed eyes narrowed in anger. I unwrapped the baby, and it was indeed a boy. I was sure I had delivered a cute little pink girl. I noticed the place where the cord on this baby was scabbed over. Now, I had no experience in birthing or infant care, but I had wounds before, and I knew it took a few days for a scab to form. Is this your baby? I asked Flurr. He's our baby, a prince. Once you've healed and your belly flattens, we shall host a grand party with cakes, and all the fae will give you presents. Presents? What was he going on about? Where was my baby? And who was this I was holding in my arms? And where were his parents? I thought, I shall go announce it to all that the prince has been born. And he kissed me on the forehead. Where's my baby? I asked Claire. And she looked as if she was going to speak, but smiled. She looked as if she was going to speak, but stopped short and smiled. Take him to your breast, darling. We need to make sure there are no issues with feeding. I did as she instructed. The foreign baby, who had not made more than a coo, began to feed without an issue. That's great. You're doing so good, she exclaimed. You must be famished. It's important you keep your strength up to make milk. I'll be right back with something for you to eat. And she left the room without closing the door behind her. And I was alone with a child, whom I was certain was not mine. I placed the baby gently in the middle of the bed. I peeked my head out the door, looking one side to the next, but no one was there. I took a few steps out and then a few more. I ran to the grand hall. Still no one was there to stop me. How could it be this easy? I jumped down the hall and opened my wings just before I hit the floor to soften my landing. I took a few steps out into the entrance, into the world outside. There were no guards, I remarked to myself. I had been the only fae that was under constant guard. Everyone else had been free to leave. I looked back and placed my hand on the tree. I almost turned back. I couldn't leave without my baby. But then I didn't know where he had taken her. For all I knew, he had slaughtered her. And I ran as fast as I had ever run, in shock that it had been so easy. I was finally free. And I ran until I couldn't run any more, and with the rising sun I fell to the soft ground, shrouded by silver blades of grass, and fell asleep. It was midday when I woke. The blood had dried on my thigh, and my back was throbbing, and the pains of birth acting as a reminder of what I had left behind, and I hated myself for it. But I found my way to the river of life after stopping to eat only once. I knew how to follow the stream. Across the river was a line of tall trees, and it would be easier to stay hidden there if anybody was looking for me. If I had known anything about Fleur, he was looking. He would have an entire swarm of Fae looking. But I saw no signs of Fleur's ship or any Fae. Still, I had to be safe, so I crossed the river and stayed within the trees, keeping the river within sight. It had taken me more than many sunrises to find my way home. Home. My heart filled with joy and my body slowed with relief. I made it home. I could see the familiar surroundings. And I entered the village. And to my dismay, all the homes had fallen. And there was just nothing but rubble and dust that surrounded me. That and many bodies. The world began to spin. Dead. They were all dead. Their corpses lying at my feet. I stepped through the graveyard that had once been my friends and my family. I ran to the home that had once been my father's and mine. Daddy, please no. Where my home had once stood, laid the body of my father. I fell to my knees and searched frantically through the sea of bodies, searching for my father's head, to no avail. I was covered in blood, flesh, and dirt as I crawled to him and laid my head on his bloated body. I'm sorry. I cried, holding my father, wishing I had never left the great oak. This had been all my fault. I had left Fleur, and he murdered all of them in an act of vengeance, just as he had promised. Fleur had proven to be good to his word, and I knew that. Why did I not believe him capable of such treachery? Why did I doubt it? My selfishness had caused all my Fae to die. Even boys young as 3 dead, their bodies, their blood was on my hands. I realized what I didn't find was any signs of the women. Where had the women gone? The sound of Fleur's voice interrupted my thoughts. Fuck, I'm next. I had to run. There's nowhere to hide. My skin paled and the heat of urine ran down my legs. Are you not happy to see me, my queen? His voice loomed over me like the king of evil, there to take my soul to the afterlife. Bile rose in my throat with a disgust. I should kill you where I stand, his voice boomed over me. I refused to look him in the eye. I rose to my knees and pulled my dressing gown open, exposing my full chest. Do it! I screamed, my voice crackling under the strain. Do it now. Shame on you, a mother abandoning her newborn baby, he said. Where's she? I cried. Where's my daughter? You had a boy, he exclaimed. Fury and anger filled his eyes, and he grabbed me, threw me over his shoulder. His bony shoulder dug into my belly, and I kicked and screamed, trying to break free of his grasp. Did you kill her? Did you slaughter your daughter? I screamed. What do you think of me? He asked. I would never harm a baby. I'm a kind and giving king. I even showed your women mercy. You should thank me. Thank him. Did he really think I should thank him after all he'd done? He actually thought he was kind and good, merciful. Even thank him was the last thing I would ever do. He returned me to the prison of my room. I landed on the floor with a thud. The wooden door had been replaced with a thick black metal one. I heard it lock behind him. The sound was all too familiar. I thought I was free of it. I had believed that for a moment I would never hear that dreaded sound again. The bed was broken, the moss filling and the blankets strewed all over the floor. There were dents in the walls, and the sitting table was broken in half. The shutters that once covered the window were no longer there. Guard covered in metal and chains was posted in front of the door. Another outside, I was sure. Fleur brought the boy to my room, instructing me to care for him. You feed him. I tried to explain that my milk had dried, but he didn't want to hear. But he did call for a wet nurse all the same. He called the boy Flurr the Glorious. It's not a name, it's a title, I said. A title for a king, he responded. Where's my daughter? I screamed. This is your child, he exclaimed, pushing me back against the wall with his hand around my neck, and you will treat him as such. He is to be king, and you will behave as a queen. He was squeezing my neck harder with every word, and I struggled to breathe, and he let go and turned to leave. I hate you, I screamed. Throwing a piece of stale bread, it whizzed past him, hitting the wall behind his head. He turned. It was on me before I could dodge his attack. He threw me on the bed, landing on me with all his weight. He flipped me on my stomach, pulling his knife from his sheath. He slashed open the flesh on my back, and blood began to flow. He ripped my wings, leaving them in shreds, and the pain was all consuming, and I screamed out, and the baby cried in fear. And then he left me, and the baby, without a word. I cried to the guard, to myself, to Mother Nature. Why doesn't he just kill me? The guards changed in shifts. A girl returned to my room each morning with my provisions. A wet nurse would come every 4 hours to feed the boy. Fleur would summon the boy, and the girl or the nurse would take him, only to return the baby a few hours later, clean, clothed, and fed. But no one spoke to me. I was invisible. I spent my days either playing with the baby, who I called Randolph, after my father, or staring out the window. I sat on the bed, lost in thoughtless stare. The day outside was calm and mild, and the cooling breeze hit my face. I wanted to enjoy the feeling as I once would had, but enjoyment was no longer a feeling I experienced. He had finally stolen away from me all my hope. I did not dream of leaving. The anger, the rage, the resolve that had dissipated, and sorrow was all that was left in its wake. Despair filled the void my desires had left. Far below was a group of women, followed by several guards. They walked in the garden of flowers, and I recognized them, and my heart skipped a beat, and a smile crossed my face. Could it be? Could I trust my eyes? Was it my family? Here. How were they here? What were they doing? Where were they going? And I wanted to be with them, and I wanted to hug them, and only for a moment I felt a semblance of happiness. Maybe not happy, but relieved. Relief felt good. Bree! Mia, I called down to them. I know them. They're my people, I cried out, looking from the window to the guard. And for the first time, the guard crossed my room to my side and looked down below. Then, to my surprise, he spoke. I'd not heard his voice before. They're the gardeners. They're planting the crops as payment for saving them from the giant in certain dismay. The king, out of the kindness of his heart, brought them to our fold for our safety. He saved them. You see how the giant ripped their wings? They cannot fly, he said, pointing to several dozen or more women far below. The king commissioned builders to construct the stairs of the ground hall from the entrance to the top, all for them, because they can't fly. Is that what he told you? I acted, knowing of the truth of what Fleur had done to my family. He had beaten them and ripped their wings, the same as he had done to me, and blamed it on the giant that I had never seen. With the guard's words, I could see the reach of Fleur's lies for the first time. I was beginning to understand how the Fae followed him. He had them all fooled. They believed he was what he claimed to be, a good and kind king. They had been blinded to his tyrant reigns. Where do they live? I asked the guards. The builders made room for them on the bottom branches, he exclaimed. Are they always watched? Are the guards posted outside their rooms as well? I asked. Well, they are savages, the guard explained. They're my family, and I'm your queen. Am I too a savage? I asked, fully and wholeheartedly offended. You're my queen. I'm here to keep you safe. I exist to serve you, he said. Why do you speak to me when no other does? I prodded some more, desperate to keep the conversation despite the insults. I had no other to talk to, and the loneliness had begun to consume me. We're told not to speak to the queen unless the king directs us to, because it's your wish. I speak to you now because you looked sad and lonely. It breaks my heart. I watch you with each passing day, and sadness fills your eyes. I wish I could make it go away. His voice was soft. I apologize. It won't happen again, Your Majesty. He stepped away and returned to his post by the door. What's your name? I asked. Riley, he responded. The changing of the guard came with little fanfare. A knock, one would enter, the other would exit. The click of the lock would ring through my ears, and that was it. I had hoped it would be Riley who came to guard me. He spoke to me. He served 5 times in a 7-day period, usually midday to sunset. At times the shifts would change, but mostly they remained the same. Why do you wear such garments? I asked. To protect us from mosquitoes and bees, he responded. Is that an issue? I'd seen many hummingbirds and the occasional woodpecker outside my window, but I'd never witnessed an insect inside my room. His excessive apparel seemed unnecessary to me. All the metal and chains made it hard for Riley and the others to move, and they made a loud, dreadful sound in the rare moments that they did. Well, Flurr did have a love for ceremony, and I assumed he just liked the cosmetics and forced his men to wear the garb. On occasion, not often, he responded. The baby had grown. He had learned to walk, and I could feed him from my tray, and he played on the floor with some wooden blocks as Riley and I sat on the edge of the bed and talked. Felt almost normal with Riley. He had that effect on me, and I began to look forward to Riley's guard, and he gave me hope and a desire to live. His presence brought to me a respite from the voices in my mind, and I wasn't so alone. I had a friend. And Flurr no longer came to me, and that too was a relief. Then one day, the guard came and took the boy without explanation. They just took him from me, leaving me all alone with no one to care for. With him, they took my reason to continue to breathe. They took him, I told Riley. I had done just as Flurr had demanded of me. I had raised him if he was my own. I loved him as if he were my own, and they took him from me. They're starting his teachings under the king, Riley said. That petrified me. Another rule of torment, utter control, a rule of greed and corruption. Yeah, that was all Flurr knew. Janice, that was rude. That's Janice, my pet fly, in case you guys didn't know. She likes to make an appearance. Anyway, where was I? He will be well cared for, Riley assured me. I'll check in on him and keep you updated. I knew Riley would. However, it was not the same as having him with me. Watching him grow, teaching him to be a good man, a kind man, a giving man who has great power, one who could give serenity to all. He was never going to learn such things from Flurr, for he never possessed such values. They had not been taught to him. You know, I had heard tales of the late King Rain, that he was a kind man, a giving and a caring man. At one time, he had been a good man. When did that leave him? I wondered, and why? Daisy had spoken in her diary of his change, and she too was confused about the change, and she had concluded that power was an evil magic. I agreed. The king had arranged for the prince to be wed, Riley said. What? He's a boy of 3. I felt disgusted at the thought. I had to put a stop to the nonsense of it all. Let me finish, my queen, Riley requested. When he comes of age, he will wed a girl of his age. She's a lovely little thing from a family close to the king. She looks a bit like you. My daughter. I had wondered about her often, but I had learned to not say a word. She was alive. He had known her. He kept her close. And in his demented way, he had taken care of her. And while at the same time, Flurr had found a way to keep his bloodline. So even if it was found out that I had not birthed the prince, no one would question his legitimacy. Though I still questioned if Flurr had fathered him. Would he have his daughter wed his son? I wouldn't put anything past him. I mean, I had no proof. Only a sneaking suspicion that felt more true to me than anything I had known as fact. The girl, though, she was of his bloodline. Therefore, any offspring, no matter what, would have claimed the throne. Flurr may be mad, but he was genius, I realized, and I suppose I'd known that for a long time. My daughter was out there and alive and well cared for, loved, and one day she would be the same as me. Queen. I shuddered at that thought. I had been the second to be crowned and the second to be in prison. My chin began to quiver at the thoughts of what she was to face in her life, and I was helpless to save her. I'm never getting out of here, I cried into my hands, and he knelt before me, taking my hands in his. Don't cry. If I could take you from here, I would. I live to serve you, my queen, Riley said. You can't. Every time I've stepped foot from this room, a Fae has paid with their life, and their blood is on my hands. Do the other Fae even see me as their queen? Indeed. There's a portrait of you in the dining hall, and a larger-than-life sculpture of you standing in the throne room. They're exquisite. Yeah, of that I had no doubt. The palace was filled with nothing but beauty and artistry. Save my prison. Do they kneel before portraits and sculptures? My voice raised with every syllable as I spat from my mouth. I nearly laughed out loud at the ridiculousness of it all. Do they ask about me, looking for me? Or is just a chunk of wood enough to appease their wonders? Do they know my freedom, my autonomy has been taken from me? Do they know that I'm nothing more than a piece of property? Did any of them see? Do they exist in the same world as me? And if so, why did none of them stand up? Why did none of them stand up and say, this is fucked up? It's carved of stone, he corrected me. No one questions the king. To Riley, I sounded outlandish, as if it was perfectly fine to worship at the feet of rock, while I stay trapped. What is this place? I hate it here. And I fell to my knees and cried out, and Riley lifted me and placed me on the bed, and he wiped my tears, and I looked into his kind eyes. I put my arms around him. The metal and the chains scratched my skin that only served to make me cry more. Remove your gear, I asked him. He slowly fidgeted with the belts and fasteners that kept the monstrosity adhered to his body. Underneath it was a beautiful man, muscular, yet soft, purple skin, just a shade lighter than my own. He pressed his full body to me, and I wrapped my arms around his neck. The feeling of his skin on mine was delectable, and I realized while I had yearned for the sun, I had also yearned for touch. I had been deprived of a hug for many seasons gone past. Tears filled my eyes once again. You feel so good, I said, pulling the click of the door's lock startled me. I pushed him from me. Flurr stood in the doorway. Riley fell to his knees, touching his head to the floor, and I pulled my knees to my chest and wrapped my arms around them in attempts to hide, and Flurr looked at me with his head crooked down, one side of his mouth raised in a half smile. He nodded his head and left. I was the most terrified of Flurr that I had ever been. Not a moment later, a guard entered to relieve Riley of his duty. Trumpets sounded through the halls. Hear he, hear he. I heard the call. By royal decree was posted on the walls, and the posters read, by order of the king, any woman tried and found guilty of the crime of adultery shall be sentenced to death by hanging. I had stayed awake all night and wondered when my punishment would come. So when the guard pulled me from my bed, I was relieved. The anticipation left me, and I was taken down the hall into the square, the common area that was for the fae to meet. It was lined with places to eat or have clothing made. The town circle was full. It went silent when I entered. I was led to the center of the stage. My eyes never left Riley, who stood center, in full garb. I looked at him. His head was down, refusing to meet my gaze. A noose hung from the beam above me. A guard placed it around his neck, and still Riley could not look at me. I wanted him to. I knew it was coming. I just wanted one friendly face in the crowd, one place to focus to ease the fright. I looked out to the sea of swarming fae staring back at me, young and old, man, woman, and child. Not a kind or forgiving expression among them. A smile crossed my face. It was finally over. Then my eyes locked on the face of a young prince, in the front being held by Flurr. Flur's brother, a tyrant himself. I'd only met him a few times. I found him to be bored and crude. And my boy reached for me, Mom, and he called, "Stop!" I called out, "Cover his eyes!" I screamed. I had accepted my fate. I didn't want to live this way, but this was beyond cruel. I was the only mother he had known. I made eye contact with Flower and mouthed, "Don't do this." I closed my eyes. I couldn't watch the boy watch me. I was happy to see an end to all the suffering that I had had for far too long. I would soon be in my loving Vivian's arms. The horns sounded and Fleur entered the room, and all the fae kneeled before him. "Adulterer," I heard him exclaim. The noose grew tight around my neck, and no one stepped in. No one cried out for this to end. My boy watched me as I struggled to find my final breath. And that brings today's Fantasy Fiction Friday to a close with the end of Glory's tale. I do want to say, I know these first three tales have a lot of pregnancy trope going on. Um, we're kind of done with the pregnancy trope. We are going to move on next week. I hope you join us for Fleur the Glorious Satan's Tale. And I look forward to seeing you then. Remember, you are found, you are worthy, and you are loved. Bye!